I'm attorney Martin Nicholson from the Law Office of Martin Nicholson, and I'm here to talk about the Netflix special, The Truth About Jussie Smollett, on August 22nd, and honestly, the timing could not be more interesting from a legal standpoint. This documentary on Netflix hit streaming platforms about 9 months after the Illinois Supreme Court completely flipped the script on one of the most controversial cases involving racial hate crime in recent memory. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about what every legal observer needs to know and understand. This isn't just another true crime documentary, it's a deep dive into a case where the legal system itself became the story and where the final chapter is still being written, technically. The legal bombshell that changed everything in this case. Now let's cut to the chase. On November 21st, 2024, the Illinois Supreme Court overturned Jussie Smollett's conviction. Not because they found him innocent, they explicitly made no finding of guilt or innocence. Instead, they threw out the conviction on due process grounds related to a prosecutorial agreement from 2019. Now, this is huge, and here's why. When prosecutors make deals, these deals have legal weight. You can't just ignore them because of public pressure mounts or political winds shift. The Supreme Court of Illinois basically said, prosecutors, you made your bed with that 2019 agreement. Now you have to lie in it. This documentary arrives right as this legal precedent is fresh, making exploration of the case more than just entertainment. It's an examining a live legal controversy with ongoing implications. What actually happened in court, the legal journey reads like a masterclass in prosecutorial complexity. In 2019, Smollett, who was an actor that was on the show Empire, gets charged, and then the prosecutor cuts some deal, basically saying he lied. The legal journey here reads like a masterclass in prosecutorial complexity. In 2019, Jussie Smollett, who was an actor in the hit show on Fox called Empire, he gets charged with basically kind of making this false claim of being a victim of a battery, a hate crime. But the prosecutors cut him some deal. But later, some special prosecutors on the case, and they refile these charges. And that was in 2019. And then in 2021, he gets convicted of filing this false report about being a victim of this racial hate crime battery, saying he got attacked by about two white men. So 2022, he's sentenced to 5 months in prison, or jail technically, and he served only 6 days before release on appeal. Now, November 2024, the Illinois Supreme Court overturns the conviction on due process grounds. The timeline matters because it shows how prosecutorial decisions can create binding legal obligations. Yes, binding legal obligations. When the first set of prosecutors made their agreement, they created legal constraints that followed the case through every subsequent proceeding. And the documentary's legal problem, here's where things get tricky from a legal perspective. The documentary claims to present new evidence and let viewers decide for themselves who's telling the truth. But that's not how the legal system works. Courts don't, or they should not, operate on Netflix ratings or public opinion. They're supposed to follow the evidence, the rules, and require cross-examination, operate under judicial oversight. When a documentary asks viewers to play jury on a case that's already been through the legal system and where the highest court has made a ruling based on constitutional principles, it's essentially asking people to second guess established legal procedures. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with second guessing. We do it all the time. The film does include interviews with Chicago police officials, lawyers, journalists, the brothers that the two African American brothers that were supposed to have attacked him. But here's where viewers will need to remember that these aren't sworn testimony under oath, subject to cross-examination and evidentiary rules. The documentary interviews are completely different standards. Okay? It's not evidence that's in court. And the Illinois Supreme Court's decision wasn't about whether Smollett was guilty or innocent. It was about something more fundamental. Due process protections that exist to protect all of us. When prosecutors make agreements with defendants, those agreements create legal obligations. Break those obligations and you violate due process, regardless of how unpopular the defendant might be or how much media attention the case generates. I always think of Bill Cosby, right? They made an agreement with him, and then when they made that agreement with him, they would not use his deposition, so that's how they got around his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and he gave this deposition where essentially he admitted to kind of drugging women and having sex with them. Fast forward many years later, different prosecutor says, oh, I'm not going to honor that agreement. And what do? They end up charging him. He goes to trial. He gets convicted. And then the case gets overturned by the Supreme Court because they say, hey, you made an agreement that you were not going to use this. You have to honor that agreement. And the conviction's overturned and he cannot be retried. Similar case with Jussie Smollett. The principle applies whether you're a celebrity or ordinary citizen facing charges. That same constitutional protection that applied to Smollett's case applies to every criminal law matter in Indiana and across the country. Now, there was this media circus effect on the legal proceedings. The case became political and cultural lightning rod from day one. Everyone from then President Trump to the Vice President Harris weighed in publicly. This documentary explores this media attention briefly, but it raises critical questions about fair legal proceedings. High-profile cases do present unique challenges for the legal system. When cases become symbols of larger social issues, it becomes harder to ensure legal decisions are based on law and evidence rather than public pressure and political considerations. The documentary's approach, presenting multiple perspectives while avoiding definitive conclusions, might seem wishy-washy, but it actually reflects a complex legal reality where procedural issues can be more important than factual disputes. Now, what new evidence actually means in legal terms? The documentary's promotional materials mention new evidence, but let's be clear, like I mentioned earlier, what this means legally. Evidence in a documentary isn't the same as evidence in a courtroom. Real legal evidence must meet strict standards. Authentication, proving it's what it claims to be. Relevance, directly related to issues in the case. Reliability, meets evidentiary standards for admissibility. Cross-examination, subject to questioning by opposing counsel. Documentary evidence doesn't meet these standards. It's interesting, it might be illuminating, but it's not legally dispositive. The prosecutorial agreement problem is the issue, the core legal issue that led to the convictions being reversed. This isn't uncommon. It happens in cases nationwide when different prosecutors take conflicting positions on the same defendant. Here's the legal principle. Prosecutors represent the state, and the state must speak with one voice. When one prosecutor makes an agreement, subsequent prosecutors can't just ignore that agreement because they disagree with it or because the public opinion has shifted. This principle protects, like I said, everyone in the criminal justice system. Without it, defendants would never know if prosecutor agreements were worth anything and and the system that's already losing credibility and predictability would lose even more credibility and predictability. The truth about Jussie Smollett arrived at a moment when the legal system has already spoken, not about guilt or innocence, but about constitutional principles and due process protections. The Illinois Supreme Court's decision represents a clear vindication of legal procedures over public pressure. Now, the documentary has a 4.8 on a 10-point scale on IMDb, which suggests there's a lot of public perception and reaction that this is not really a good documentary. But whether you like the documentary or not, I believe the Indiana or the Illinois Supreme Court got it correct when they said that for anyone facing charges, these constitutional protections exist for everyone. And it's important you have competent legal representation that knows how to use these protections effectively. Because those same principles that applied in this high profile case apply in every courtroom in Indiana and even on low profile cases. The documentary might let viewers decide for themselves, and that is totally fine, but the legal system already has, and the constitutional principles won the day in this case, regardless of whether you think he's innocent or guilty. Now that's your Nicholson Nugget of the Day. Please be sure to like and subscribe.